Hi, this is Rick Savitsky from Chortek. In this video, I'm going to talk about break-even analysis. I'm going to explain why I believe it's a best practice for manufacturers, going to go through some definitions, show you how to calculate it manually, and then show how modern business analytic tools can help automate the process of the calculation and allow us to focus on what the results are showing so we can make improvements to the bottom line. So I'm going to jump right into it. Why is this important? Well, it's easy to overlook this basic concept of what is our company's break even. It's also very easy to have some people know that information, perhaps instinctively, the owners, management, but perhaps not the salespeople that are actually bidding new additional work. Or they're working with stale information. So it's important to pay attention to it, use current information, and then make sure that our quoting process takes into account the basic idea. So before I get too much further into that, the definitions. Break even is relatively straightforward. It's the point where revenue equals costs for a period of time, say a month or a quarter. Period. That's pretty simple. However, important to understand, so we can apply it, is this distinction between fixed costs and variable costs. In short, fixed costs are not going to fluctuate based on revenue, and they're generally stable per a budget or a plan, at least for the near term, for a certain number of months into the future, maybe even 12 months. Whereas variable costs are going to fluctuate as additional production and revenue is incurred. So additional labor, additional materials need to be purchased and issued to jobs, parts, etc. That's the basics. So how do we calculate it? Well, we need to classify every expense account in the financial system general ledger into these two buckets, either fixed or variable, period. Ideally, that's done in the general ledger itself, or a tool that's going to extract the information from the general ledger and allow us to save those two states, one or the other. Or if we can't do that, we got to throw the detail into Excel and then make those two subtotals. Then we're going to use algebra to calculate the given profit or loss as a function based of revenue. So what are my fixed costs and what is my variable cost as a percentage? And then that's going to be our calculation. So we can get both our break-even point, but also if we have revenue exceeding our break-even, what is that incremental profit going to be? So let me show you how we do that old school using Excel. So I've got a spreadsheet here, and I've got a few things just to really simply illustrate. I've got fixed costs, which are going to be the same. I've got a variable cost calculation as a percentage of revenue, and I'm in this example using 54%. And then I've got a series of formulas here, and I'm just going to make this a little bit bigger, and we'll walk through it step by step. Really simple. My variable cost is taking revenue times that cost percentage. My fixed costs are simply referencing that cell, and then the profit is the difference between the revenue and those two cost buckets. Very simple. We can calculate break-even as a function. I'm not going to break it down at the moment, but we can mathematically calculate break-even using those same components. And then we can also do some very simple what if we get to 1.6, or here I'm going to make the distinction, the difference between 1.6 and 1.7 million, the incremental profit is 46,000. And that is the inverse of my variable cost rate. So that's the math and the mathematical calculation that goes into it. Now, the question is, who wants to keep doing this in Excel? I wouldn't. This is a process to update. We got to make sure our fixed costs are being gathered and captured periodically. We got to make sure our calculated cost rate is also being updated. And if I don't want to do it, and if maybe someone on your team doesn't want to do it, the question is who's going to do it, or how often is it being done? And so that's kind of the why. You can do it manually, but if it's a pain in the neck, maybe it's not going to happen. So what I'd like to show you is a different tool that's going to allow us to get it done automatically without doing that manual calculation, and allow us to measure it, review it regularly, and here's the key, if we're doing that regularly as a routine, we should be able to improve our results primarily by making sure that our cost rates, our variable costs, are properly reflected in our quoting system, so that everyone involved in the quoting process is using current information. So let me share my screen again. I'll show you a tool that we use with other manufacturers called Fathom. And it's very powerful because we can focus on the results. So in this case here, I have a calculated break-even point, a slope line in red showing my variable costs, and where we're at in a recent period as far as operating cost, operating profit, and then incremental changes. Now in this case, I'm in a prior period. My fixed costs are $495. I'm going to change this and show and illustrate that it's very, very easy to essentially pick any period of time. I'm now looking at a 12-month period. This fixed cost here is basically matching what I was showing in the spreadsheet. And in fact, all these other numbers are really close. There's a slight rounding difference here, but it's basically the illustration I was showing in Excel. So looking at incremental revenue between 1.6 and 1.7, the difference between those two operating profits is, trust me, roughly $46,000. And so I can see both where we're at now and then ask that question, okay, if we have an incremental increase in revenue of $100,000, how much is going to come to the bottom line? And focus on literally using this information. I want a quick recap of where those top costs are, how my profit has been fluctuating over time. Okay, there's a lot of helpful information we have, but the key here is how can I work with this regularly and actually do something about it? And again, I'm going to just articulate, if the sales team is not comfortable, doesn't have access to what we were just sharing there, and understanding, hey, what cost do we need to cover as a business to cover our fixed costs? What's our incremental cost on top of that? That can influence how we quote new work, how aggressive we are with our pricing, and very, very importantly, making sure that those cost rates and the percentage markups we're using over material, labor, and everything to come up with a sell price is reflecting reality, and we're using current, accurate information. So that's an example of how we can use tools to focus on the outcomes. If you like this video, please give it a little like, a thumbs up. We have other videos that talk about other elements in this broad area of manufacturing best practices. We'd love to hear from you. Give me a ring, send an email, fill out our web form, and we'd love to talk to you, figure out how we might be able to serve you, and look forward to hearing from you. Thanks a lot. Bye.